Welcome to the Golf Improvement Podcast, Episode 20.
Welcome to the podcast for golf lovers and enthusiasts who are looking to take their games to new heights. Dedicated to custom club fitting, short game improvement, and effective practice to improve your golf game. This is the Golf Improvement Podcast with your host, Tony Wright.
Hello, this is Tony Wright from Game Improvement Golf in Oak Ridge, Tennessee, with the Golf Improvement Podcast, dedicated to bringing you useful information on custom club fitting, short game improvement, and effective practice techniques to take your game to new heights. Well, I'm starting to get excited about another January and another time of going to the PGA Equipment Show in Orlando, Florida. I'll be there in a little less than a week. I will get to play golf about 2 days in hopefully 70-degree weather. And as usual, I'll get the opportunity both to go to the actual equipment show, which is absolutely huge. There are so many booths, so much walking. It's great exercise, besides lots of fun to see all the things that are there. But I go to what's called the Acra Demo Day on Monday of the show. Acra is a shaft manufacturer, and they make wonderful shafts, and they also collaborate with KBS shafts. And KBS is one of the great steel shafts that you can use in your golf clubs. And the second day, I'm going to spend about 6 hours at a Flight Scope certification class. There's a certification for using the Flight Scope launch monitor. I haven't been able to do this class in the past, but I will get to do it this year, and they have expanded it to, I think in the past it's only been about 3 hours, and now it'll be about 6 hours, actually being held on the site of what's called the Demo Day, where a lot of the club manufacturers and people who participate in the show actually allow people to hit clubs and hit shots with all the new clubs. So that's going to be a lot of fun. And then on the final day that I'll be there, the Saturday after the show is done, there's a Seymour putter. I wouldn't call it exactly a certification class, but it's a training class on how to effectively putt better. And I think it's at the Mike Bender Academy down in Orlando. So it's going to be a lot of fun again. This is the fifth time, I believe, I've been down at the PGA show, and I've been down there the last 4 years. And I hope to do something a little bit related to my podcast while I'm down there, if things will work out. I'll try to do a few mini interviews and maybe do a separate podcast just with those interviews. We'll have to see how the background noise at the PGA show goes. For those of you who won't be able to be there, I know that's a lot of you, I expect many of you know that the Golf Channel actually broadcasts live from the PGA show floor during the time of the PGA show. So you can catch a lot of the things that go on just by watching the Golf Channel. So we'll get more of that to you in the coming weeks. Well, hello, this is Tony Wright with the Golf Improvement Podcast, and today we are welcoming back Glen Coombe, the putting doctor. He's a longtime putting improvement expert, my personal putting mentor, I'm going to say, and an expert in applying information from the SAM Putt Lab and other sources of information to help golfers putt their best. So, Glen, welcome today in 2015.
Well, hi, Tony, and certainly thanks for having me back and allowing me to share the information that I've been developing, learning over the last, dare I say, 25 years.
Oh, I thought it was only maybe 23, but there you go. Well, you said on Twitter, the countdown is on. Are you ready to commit 2015 to your best year in golf? And so we've got the bar out there. We're going to talk about a couple of maybe a little different topics in putting improvement than you might hear in other places. And one of them is putting tempo.
Tony, let's if we can, kind of back up. And the first thing that we really, I think, in my personal opinion, should talk about is commitment. And part of
I love that.
Has been Okay, do you want to start again?
No, that's fine. And no, I think it's so perfect that you say that, Because once you say that word, it just relates so much to tempo, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yes, it does.
Yeah. So you got us on that track. So let's go.
Okay. So when we talk about commitment, we change the focus of what our goals are. And if we, first of all, write them down, speak them, form a plan or a structure around that commitment, then we can inspect what we expect. And when we do that, we hold ourselves personally accountable for the time we spend and for the results we get. And the science is very clear that focused practice is so much more effective than the average amateur's efforts for golf improvement. So from there, and it again speaks to my original putting lesson plan and the commitment on the part of the student to re-experience what they learn through that lesson plan twice a week for 4 weeks. And the average student with that focused approach to putting improvement averages 4 strokes in handicap improvement with a record 20 strokes in 8 weeks.
20 in 8 weeks? Wow.
Now this woman started at a 105, but 8 weeks later didn't email me, but emailed Germany and told them that she was consistently shooting 85. My God, you just can't buy that kind of word of mouth.
Yeah.
It still gives me chills.
Yeah. So really get serious about what you're attempting or what you really desire to do.
So let's make that commitment. By the way, this is day 5, and I have myself spent each of the preceding 4 days between putting, chipping, and full swing. Each of the 4 days of this new year. And before the day is out today, I will be back to the chipping and putting for today, as is my program of alternate days. I did some full swing work yesterday.
Yeah, and I know you hadn't been playing much golf lately, too, as we've talked in the past. So you're going to get that?
It's coming. The elbows are good. I'm just trying to find where I'm comfortable. I went out and played a couple weeks ago, and embarrassing to me because I did not warm up on the practice surface putting-wise. I went out having hit some balls on the range and shot a 78, so I wasn't unhappy. I played tee to green like I should, but the overseeded greens had me fooled in terms of green speed and break. So had to educate myself all over again, and have been working on it. And hopefully before the upcoming PGA show, I'll be able to tee it up at least once.
Oh, that's exciting. That's great. Well, let's go back a little bit then, though, to putting tempo. Now that you set the stage, to me, this was one of the areas when I first got into the Sam Putt Lab world that, when I took the classes from Christian, movement dynamics was one of the really high topics in what he talks about.
And he is such a very well-renowned kineticist.
Oh, yeah. And over the last year, I would say that one of my biggest sort of ahas is that it is so important. And, I recently worked with a 2 handicap guy that is struggling mightily with short putts and being very careful in his putting. Okay. I mean, super slow tempo. And working with him to, and in fact, at one level too, I mean, I'll just be honest, it was a little disappointing. I couldn't get him to really just grasp on and make that commitment to starting to work with a metronome and getting his tempo a little better.
Well, the real secret to finding a player's innate tempo, because we all have different twitch responses,
Yeah.
muscular wise. And if you go back to the biokinetics and you understand that muscles are either on or off, tonus or antitonus, we don't have anything in between.
Mm-hmm.
So when we look at tempo, probably the best success that I have had in unlocking a player's true tempo is to have them assume their putting stance and they close their eyes.
Yeah.
And with or without a metronome as a guide in the background, I tap on their shoulder just behind their left ear, kind of on their back, just above their shoulder blade or scapula, if you will, and have them make a continuous putting motion. When they have their eyes closed, they're very susceptible to changes suggested verbally by the coach for stroke length. And at that point, they find what is a comfort level, and we adjust the backstroke to be about 2/3 the forward stroke. And we find that that causes a nice, almost accelerating moment through impact, yet isn't a jerk that is the response to a very carefully controlled backswing. So once we have that working at a proper tempo, we say to the golfer, keep that going, but open your eyes.
Yeah.
And they see and take mental ownership of the new stroke length and tempo.
So it can, and that's one of the, to me, this is exciting too, to hear you talk about that part, because it's great to get some of this, some of the help you get from the SAM, but going a little bit beyond that and being able to help people to find that tempo without the SAM a little bit is good.
Well, the nice thing is that we can compare before and after, as you know, on screen. We can bring up two separate reports. So if we want to look at timing, we can bring up the original short backstroke that takes an exceedingly long time. We can apply the fix remedy starting point for the new tempo, and then we can do another SAM capture, and we can show directly one to the other what happens when we kind of stretch the stroke length out and have it moving in proper tempo so that we aren't jerking at the ball in our forward stroke trying to apply artificial acceleration.
And you said that twice, and I hope people don't miss that, so that one of the big manifestations then of being very careful is that you do have to kind of jerk at the ball. Not kind of. You have to jerk at the ball in your forward stroke if you're not putting at that, as you called it, natural tempo.
Yes, when we have a backstroke with a appropriate length and tempo, we have a transition to the forward stroke that is natural. When we have an artificially careful, slow, manipulated backstroke, it's generally shorter, and as a result, the transition from antitonus to tonus is that we artificially either push the shoulders or employ the hands, and we get a hit motion rather than a continuous stroke motion. And the difference in distance control is dramatic. The hit stroke, or the artificial acceleration stroke, is often highly variable in the outcome of distance control versus the more natural, innate tempo that a golfer can employ once they learn the proper technique.
Well, let's leave this topic, unless you have anything else that you want to add for a second, and we maybe come back to that at the end. So over to you for a second.
In a hierarchy of what really works on the putting green in play, let me suggest that distance control is number one. We're all pretty well able to judge directionality in a raw sense for breaking putts and straight putts. But from distance, if you really want to lower your handicap, then certainly distance control is key. And when I teach my lesson plan, our first exercise is strictly training the brain to accept and react to the specific distance that we're putting.
Yeah. Yeah. Very good. Well, we're going to jump to another, you can't say it's not related because they are all connected. But, when you came and visited me, gosh, it's over 2 years ago, and we did our training, I noticed that you were talking with some of the people that were going through the training on Quiet Eye. And Quiet Eye is something that is really interesting to me, and it relates again to focus and commitment, but maybe finding the right kind of focus, but being able to help golfers to, I guess, a little bit let go when they're in their putting stroke. So let's let you talk about that a little bit, Glenn, today.
Well, first and foremost, I would suggest to everyone to simply open their laptop and enter into the search parameter Quiet Eye. And you will likely come up with the research done by Professor Joan Vickers. Vickers is a professor at the University of Calgary, and she wrote what I feel is the Bible, and I know you've got perception, cognition, and decision training, Quiet Eye in action. Quiet Eye is the magic that most golfers are seeking but have not learned. And Quiet Eye is, if we'll reduce it to its very base, we could say that it is the trigger to the zone or the non-conscious. Yeah. We'll call it the zone because everybody's familiar with that term.
That word, right.
Using the techniques of Quiet Eye, many PGA professionals have also agreed that it is absolutely the switch that takes them out of the present into the non-conscious, where they execute automatically. I had a Champions Tour qualifier who I worked with call me from one of his events a couple years ago to tell me that he had made a number of putts through his round where he had no recollection of pulling the trigger. And that speaks to stroke automation.
Yeah.
And one of my students, a PGA instructor who, like you, had me come in and do the initial Sam Putt Lab training, came up and spent another day and a half with me in my studio at home. And his exit comment tickled me. And he said, of all the instructors I've met who have come through our club and who I've had a chance to work with, he said, I've never met anyone who focused so strongly on routine. And I was quiet for a second, looked at him, kind of tilted my head, smiled, and said, thank you. Because it truly is about routine. And if we use fundamentals such as Quiet Eye, and we build a routine that is truly routine, we can work around the outside noise of an opponent who's jingling his change in his pocket, or someone who is walking about and causing you discomfort. If you are truly in your routine, the chances of noticing that distraction are greatly reduced. So let's talk about Quiet Eye. And Quiet Eye, in the study that Vickers did, was very well documented. She used two groups, very scientific. And if you will, golfers, use a Sharpie and put a dot in a dimple. Doesn't have to be big or too large. If you use a line, put the dot just behind the line. If you don't, then find a void on the top of the ball and put the dot and place that dot at the rear of the ball, visible from address, and use that dot as your gaze reference. But here's the trick. In using Quiet Eye, we refine our targeting. So in my teaching, my students identify the entry point into the hole on a clock face. And the entry point can be from 3 to 9 o'clock. But we'll call that entry point on a half-hour clock face. So my entry point might be 4:30, might be 8 o'clock, depending on which way I perceive the break.
Yeah.
What we do is we take a mental picture of that entry point. We actually visualize the ball going in to that entry point. We will correlate that with an aim point, either up the zero line or with aim point, based on our perception of distance and slope that you calibrate. That becomes our focus of attention. When we separate focus of attention and gaze, we have the switch prepared for the zone. We start our procedure. We take a nice exhale, a cleansing breath, if you will, in the Zen, and we begin. When we step into the ball, we take one more look down the line after we've critically aimed our putter. We identify our entry point. We take that mental picture, keep that in mind. We allow our eyes to come back down the predicted path of the putt. We let our eyes rest on the dot at the back of the ball. And we have to have a little delay here. It takes about 150 milliseconds, about a second and a half, for the brain to truly switch into the non-conscious. But as we're doing that, we're just gazing at the dot, and we, at times, will almost defocus. The eyes will soften and focus. The mind, the non-conscious mind, is taking in the ultimate target. And at the end of that little pause, the putter automatically goes back, makes the appropriate stroke length and velocity to make the putt. And it's, as you know, truly scary how well the non-conscious will make minor adjustments for path, face angle to accomplish the end goal.
Yeah. Well, I guess one thing I would say, too, is, we're talking about this in being in golf, but if you look at Vicker's research, she has applied it to every element of sports, whether it's hockey and basketball or baseball, and gets, similar results where, the effect of this Quiet Eye approach really works.
Indeed. One last point before we leave Quiet Eye for a bit. The dot at the rear scrim of the ball, or without a dot visible because we're playing the ball down, has been documented. As I said early, Vickers had a control group and a study group. The control group, she had placed the dot at the top of the ball versus her working group at the rear of the ball. And as you know, the documentation that she generated proved very quickly that the dot should appear at the back of the ball.
She has done a lot of detailed work. It's great.
Indeed.
Well, this does move us into really a new area. And, I don't talk about this much, but, I don't get much into product focus and things like that. But I am very fascinated about this next topic, and it's something called Focus Band, and it's just coming about. Isn't that right, Glenn? I think they're just about to release this product.
Well,
if they haven't,
let's say it has been in play, practice, and use on the PGA Tour for 4 years. in its original form factor.
Okay.
Focus band is a wireless EEG, electroencephalogram. And basically, it's a brainwave tracker. And I will say that I was very privileged to have the first focus band in North America some 4 years ago.
Yeah.
Having met the inventor, Graham Bolton, at the PGA show, introduced by a Australian friend of mine, he and an American colleague of mine who lives in Sweden, and I got together with Graham in a hotel room in Orlando, and I experienced focus band for the first time, and they had to hold me down. I absolutely lost my mind and immediately left golf. And they were just trying to calm me down and say, just focus on golf for now. No pun intended. But you were in another realm. You didn't lose your mind because you were excited. You were just into something. I was excited. I saw further potential, which they have certainly recognized.
Yeah.
But the bottom line is that focus band is a wireless EEG, which allows us to track brainwaves and to quantify what's going on based on those brainwaves. Now, that's all very good for the professional who can interpret those results, but what they did to make it very usable for the golfer or whatever sport athlete is that they combined it with audio tones and avatars on screen. So you can initially have an avatar which shows you, as you look at the computer screen, where your focus is in terms of conscious, non-conscious, we'll call it left and right brain.
Yeah.
Where your tension levels are, looking at facial muscular tension, where your anxiety levels are, and then, of course, quantifying quiet eye. And when we put all of these together and we learn the various tones that are assigned to each wavelength, we quickly, and I do mean quickly, learn, are you ready?
Yeah.
What focus feels like.
What focus feels like.
Let me say that again.
Yeah.
What focus feels like. And my original take on this was, oh my God, what could we learn and what could a younger golfer learn? And what life-changing event that could be if we could teach a youngster how to quantify focus and how that would apply scholastically.
Yeah.
It just boggles the mind. No pun intended.
Yeah.
So when we have the ability to use biofeedback and the audio tone as we practice and play, all of a sudden we have a game changer. Now, the original focus band hardware was it was a little Frankenstein in its form factor. It was a adjustable band that went around the forehead and around the back of the head and had an ear clip, and it wasn't something that you could hide from anybody. If you were wearing it, they knew you were wearing it because it looked a little unusual, but it was still something that you could wear in practice, not just putting, but in full swing as well. But are you ready? Next month, or this month, we will have the new iFocus Band. And iFocus Band is the ultimate game changer. where the original Focus Band was a $4,000 investment without training, $10,000 with ongoing support on tour and daily training for PGA Tour athletes. It was $10,000.
Huh.
The new Focus Band will have a price point in the $500 neighborhood.
Yeah, boy,
$500. So for the price of a custom driver, we now have a brain training suite that will actually, by form factor, fit in your existing golf hat or can be worn standalone in a sweatband or skull cap. And you can use it with a smart device, with a tablet, or standalone, just hearing the biofeedback audio tones.
Yeah.
So look for this year to be an absolute game changer when it comes to the area that I've been in for 20 plus years, and I call that brain training.
Yeah. I can't wait. I haven't ordered one yet, but it's coming. I don't know if those folks are going to be at the PGA show in a couple of weeks. But if not, I'll bet they'll be lurking around, won't they?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Well, Glen, let's end with as we said, making your. Although I'm not sure you didn't do it at the beginning, to tell you the truth. The big tasks that people, in terms of their putting, some of the key things you think they ought to pay attention to help them get better this year.
Let's start with the obvious, and we stated it in the beginning. It's commitment to focused practice, and that means not chasing 3 balls around the putting green before we tee off, but actually spending a couple of sessions each week with 24 balls on the putting green, going through focused putting drills that hopefully will be both blocked and random in their nature. And certainly if a golfer wants something that's already done, they can go to my website and take in the money-back guarantee putting experience. Sorry, shameless self-promotion, Tony.
You've never done that before. That's fine.
The copyright on my lesson plan will pass its 22nd year this year. And if you work on simply your putting twice a week and spend 45 minutes to an hour on specific drills, you will improve your scoring, and dare I say, you will improve your full swing as well. So many of the golfers that I have worked with have come back and said that their success with their refined putting stroke has translated into better ball striking and, again, lower scores. So you can, through putting, improve your overall game and certainly strip strokes off your handicap.
Well, I think that's a great ending point, Glen. And I want to thank you again for another great interview where we talked a lot about focus and commitment. I would say that's a great way to sort of summarize that. For those of you who again want to learn more about Glen Coombe, the putting doctor, you can go to puttingdoctor.net. And the other thing I guess I didn't realize until last night when I was preparing a little more is you do have some great write-ups both on Quiet Eye and on the Focus Band on your website. So those of you,
under the news tab, you'll find some of the articles that I have written in the past for the Golf Coaches Association newsletter, the Collegiate Coaches Oregon, and worth, they're, sort of focused for the coach, but certainly food for thought for the golfer who is looking for the success that can be theirs for 2015. And I know, probably a certain segment are not located as I am in Florida, but in the northern areas of the United States, and maybe using the winter weather as an excuse to think about their game but not work on it. Let me say that you can work on your putting stroke indoors.
Oh, yeah.
You, in a lot of areas, can go to an indoor driving range to work on your full swing. So, no excuses. Let's get to work. Let's do this in 2015 and track your success. All of my students have a report card in the back of my lesson plan booklet. We track handicap, practice sessions, and our success.
Well, Glenn, go ahead. Sorry.
Inspect what you expect.
Inspect what you expect. And as you always say, and you said it quietly, let's do this.
Never leave a putt short.
Even better. Thanks again, Glenn.
www.gameimprovementgolf.com.
Glenn, thanks again for doing another interview with me on putting improvement. And we actually covered a few other really interesting topics, quiet eye and eye focus band. To learn more about Glen Coombe, the putting doctor, and also about quiet eye and eye focus band, which we discussed during this podcast, go to puttingdoctor.net. And there'll also be some links in the show notes that I'll provide related to some of the things Glenn has written up on quiet eye and also on eye focus band. I very much hope when I'm at the PGA show in about a week that I'll be able, I don't know if the focus band folks have an actual booth, but I think they'll be there, and I'm going to do my best to get to try that out and get my own personal experience with it. A reminder for those of you who listen to my podcast, about a week ago, I think in my last blog post, I created a reader survey, and if you have not completed that, I would really appreciate it if you would take about 5 or 10 minutes and do that. I'm also going to put a link to that in the show notes today. Well, that's it for today. Now, my next actual podcast will be in about 3 weeks, but it is going to be another great one. A 3-way podcast interview with Dr. Mark McDaniel, one of the authors of a wonderful new book on learning, Make It Stick, and Dr. Robert Bjork, director of the UCLA Bjork Learning and Forgetting Lab. We'll be talking learning skills. See you in 2 weeks.
Game Improvement Golf, your source of information and inspiration to become an exceptional golfer now. www.gameimprovementgolf.com.